Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month we'll be discussing the traitor Marines, known as the Iron Warriors. Iron within, iron without.
Indeed, this month we'll chronicle how they came to be, their traits in war, and of course, noble characters. Well, Zeckthar, what are we going to be talking about this week?
Well, this week is our favorite time because we're going to talk about notable characters. And I figured, who else should we start with but the most noble of the Iron Warriors, Barabas Dantioch. Now, the first records of Warsmith Barabas Dantioch was his command of the 51st Expeditionary Fleet of the Iron Warriors Legion during the Great Crusade in the late 30th millennium. He was actually favored by Perturabo due to his supreme tactical acumen and skill at building formidable fortifications. Commanding the 51st Expeditionary Fleet, Warsmith Dantioch led a large Iron Warriors contingent against a massive Xenos incursion known as the Vulpes Straits Hrud Migration. Upon the fortress world of Galgos, the Hrud infiltrated and destroyed the Iron Warriors garrison. The intense entropic fields generated by the migratory Hrud swarms caused stone to age and brought flesh to ruin, turning the Astartes warriors into so much dust and bones, rusting their armor and jamming their bolters as the Iron Warriors' fortress crumbled all about them. Only then did the Rachidian beasts creep out of their every nook and crevice to attack, stabbing and slicing with their venomous claws. This left Warsmith Dantioch prematurely aged and crippled. Very few survivors made it out alive when Stormbirds extracted the survivors from the remains of Golgush. Many of the Astartes, in fact, died from premature aging and were left in aged superhuman bodies.
Hey, wait a minute. I remember talking about this guy. Yeah, he's the one that aged like 3,000 years, being one of the oldest loyalist Astartes to date, right?
Yep, one and the same.
Yeah, this guy's pretty cool. I remember briefly discussing him when I did a short vox on Alexis Pollux. Did you know they were good friends?
I did, but I haven't gotten that far yet.
Oh, gotcha. But for those of you who wish to know more about his good friend and first chapter master of the Crimson Fists, check out my vox, The Great Father Alexis Pollux.
Absolutely, brother. Why, it's one of my favorites of yours. But before you guys check that out, let me finish up Barabas' tale. In the Hrud migration aftermath, the worlds of Crack Fiorina, Strapole, and Golgus were lost. The Warsmith questioned Primarch Perturabo's prosecution of the Hrud extermination campaign, which left half of the Grand Company dead. Dantioch soon found himself relieved from command of the 51st Expeditionary Fleet and permanently garrisoned on the world of Lesser Demantine for his presumption.
Pardon me, brother, but I thought you said he was favored by Perturabo.
I did. But as you know by this point, Perturabo was known for his temper, as well as his very destructive mood swings.
Right.
After the incident, Dantioch chose to wear no helmet, for his face and skull were enclosed with an iron mask he had crafted. The faceplate was a work of brutal beauty, an interpretation of the 4th Legion's badge, the very same iron mask symbol that adorned his shoulder. It was whispered that Dantioch had worn the mask immediately after he pulled it glowing from the forge, the better to hammer it into shape around his shaven skull. He then plunged his head and iron mask alike into ice water, fixing the beaten metal into place forever around his equally grim features. While on the world of Lesser Demantine, he became the planner and architect of a superbly constructed Schadenhold fortress on that world. After the triple disasters of Golgus, Stratopole, and Krakforenia, the name of Dantioch and his legacy was utterly expunged, and his name became a byword for failure on an epic scale within the 4th Legion.
More of Perturabo's rage, I presume.
Well, while I believe that was a chunk of it, a very large piece of it, I also think that Barabas felt pretty guilty about his failure to conquer the Hrud, as well as a heavy burden of losing more than half his troops. But moving on. During the many months within the small Iron Warriors detachment garrison on the planet, they heard disturbing rumors of the galaxy being conquered by the forces of the War Master Horus. Dantioch suspected that the bulk of the 4th Legion had willingly joined the traitorous War Master's cause. When Warsmith Krindle arrived at Lesser Demantine, With the 51st Expeditionary Fleet, he came to the Schadenhold with new orders for the Iron Warriors garrison. They were ordered by their Primarch to prepare for the Traitor Legion's offensive against Terra. Lesser Demantine would be used as a resupply point for Horus's forces. Dantioch refused to acquiesce to his Primarch's orders, for the Iron Warriors on Lesser Demantine remained loyal and would not share in their traitorous brethren's damnation. In response, Crendel vowed to destroy Dantioch's beloved fortress in the name of Horus. Now, unknown to Crendel, an interloper had clandestinely observed their meeting. Disguised as a hooded cleric, he lowered his hood to reveal his true identity. He was a brother space marine of the vaunted Ultramarines Legion, sent to Lesser Demantine in order to recruit Warsmith Dantioch's art and expertise in the field of siegecraft. The Ultramarine's name was Taro Nicodemus, and he was a tetrarch of Ultramar and the honor guard to Rabute Gilman himself.
Very similar to Perturabo's Trident, or Horse's Mornival, I would presume.
You would presume correct. The only difference was the Tetrarch was an actual command, while the other groups you mentioned held different ranks in their respective legions, while the rank Tetrarch was the highest rank an Ultramarine could get, and the answer to no one but Gilman himself. Anywho, the Ultramarines Primarch knew of Dantioch's particular skills and suspected that they would be sorely needed. The War Master had exploited the weakness of the Iron Warriors Primarch's pride, and Dantioch's history with Perturabo was no secret. Lord Gilman felt he could rely on this same weakness. Nicodemus had also informed Dantioch of Horus's treachery and besmirched the 4th Legion with accusations of rebellion, heresy, and murder. At first enraged by such baseless accusations, Dantioch was tempted to blow the Ultramarine from Schadenhold's battlements. To prove his statement was true, Dantioch agreed to hear out his kindred's treason firsthand. Once convinced of the Iron Warriors' betrayal of the Emperor, Dantioch inquired as to what Gilman would have them do. Nicodemus looked upon the grim faces of those gathered within the chamber and saw nothing but loyal servants of the Emperor. He informed Dantioch and the other Iron Warriors to hold their ground as long as they could, for the efforts of the faithful few could slow the traitors' advance, giving the Emperor time to fortify Terra for the coming storm and for Rabute Gilman to cut through the confusion Horus had sown to prepare a loyalist response. And so Dantioch commanded his meager forces against the entire might of the 51st Expedition Fleet and the 14th Grand Company of the Iron Warriors for 366 solar days, until the traitors deployed an Imperator-class Titan to destroy the Schadenhold. Just before the fortress fell, Dantioch and his surviving loyalist Iron Warriors teleported to port the flagship of the traitors and commandeered it. Tetrarch Nicodemus convinced Dantioch that Rabute Gilman still had need of such ingenuity and skill, for the Imperium was frail, and an Iron Warrior's eye could spot such weakness, and the good grace of his hand might make it strong once again. And so Dantioch then set course towards the 500 worlds of Ultramar, with the aim of helping to fortify and defend it against the forces of the traitor legions. Dantioch and his compatriots managed to arrive in the realm of Ultramar before the Battle of Kolth was initiated by the treacherous Wordbearers Legion. Now, during the attack, the Dark Apostle, Erebus, managed to complete a blasphemous ritual on Kolth's surface, which summoned a rune storm to the galaxy's eastern fringe. A monstrous warp storm larger and more destructive than anything spacefaring humanity had witnessed since the days of the Age of Strife. It would split the void asunder, dividing the galaxy in two, and rendering vast tracts of the Imperium impassable for centuries. The 500 worlds were unnavigatable at this time, except for the most high-risk enterprises. Trade and communication across the realm collapsed. Ultramar, as a single and admirable area of imperial governance, was ruined. The ruined storm would also isolate and trap those loyalist forces caught behind it, like the Ultramarines, preventing them from coordinating their efforts and supporting one another as the traitor legions moved towards Terra. Barabas Dantioch was unfortunately seen as a traitor. He was an Iron Warrior of some renown, after all. Simultaneously, he was a betrayer of his own legion because he had forsworn the Iron Warriors and decided to stand with the Loyalists. He stood alone, besieged by the conflicting loyalties of the new Riven Imperium. Yet for his excellence in siegecraft and his staunch loyalty to the Emperor, Barabas Dantioch was recruited by the Lords of Ultramar and vouched for by Rabute Gilman himself to help them construct and defend the greatest contingency plan, and perhaps the second greatest heresy the Imperium has ever known, the Imperium Secundus. Dantioch stoically accepted the challenge. He had supposed that he would be employed to fortify the physical defenses of Macragge and other key worlds of Ultramar, for this was his forte. But the Primarch of the Ultramarines had other ideas. Rabute Gilman revealed to Barabas the long sequestered mysteries of Sotha, and Dantioch realized that for the survival of the pocket empire like Ultramar lay less in fortifying its physical defenses and far, far more in strengthening its function and operation. Sotha was a far-flung world close to the edge of the galaxy's eastern fringe, almost at the limits of both the fiefdom of the 500 worlds and the span of the imperial territory. It was one of the few Terra-comparable ecosystems discovered so far out in the galactic east during the Great Crusade. Imperial surveyors of the world had discovered something amazing beneath Mount Pharos, the tallest of all the peaks in the planet's majestic mountain ranges. A survey mission conducted by both archaeologists and xenoculturists discovered a massive aperture constructed by an unknown xeno species. Known as the Pharos, the interior spaces of the large archaic device were cut from the mountain's living rock by processes that no one had been able to explain. Dantioch spent over 9 solar months unlocking Sotha's mysteries and activating the planet's deep time secrets. Dantioch agreed absolutely with the Primarch's assessment. Sotha offered a way in which they might overcome the rune storm, rather than batten down against its wrath. Dantioch and the Ultramarines descended into the vast chambers of the Pharos on prefabricated walkways of STC design to provide platforms, ladders, stairs, and bridges that would allow humans to traverse and explore the almost endless interior of the Pharos. During their explorations, they discovered a central chamber, later known as Primary Location Alpha, which Dantioch was convinced was the center of the entire mechanism. Dantioch took to referring to it in his notes as the tuning stage, or sounding board. He became fairly confident that he understood the function of the Pharos, even from the data he had studied before his arrival on Sotha. The Pharos was part of an ancient interstellar navigation system, both a beacon and route finder, and it also permitted instantaneous communication across unimaginable distances. Unlike Imperial warp technology that used the Immaterium to bypass real space, the quantum function of the Pharos once allowed for site-to-site teleportation, perhaps through networks of gateways. Its fundamental function lay not with the psychic energy, but with empathic power.
Brother, you going to mention who actually built the Pharos?
Well, I wasn't. It was going to be a mystery, but what the hey. The Pharos was one of many such artifacts scattered across the galaxy. It was built of blackstone, and the array of Pharos devices was originally intended by the Necrons to provide a way for them to achieve rapid interstellar communication and FTL travel. Like most other Necron technology based on blackstone, the Pharos was able to negate the effects and presence of the warp, or to enhance it.
You want to mention the downside to using it too?
Yes, I will, but not right now. Have a little bit of patience, brother.
Fine.
Anyways, Dantioch also believed that the other way stations like the Pharos still existed, or once did, on other worlds throughout the galaxy. It was not one single beacon like the Astronomicon. Dantioch believed that the Pharos and other stations like it were once used to create a network of navigational pathways between stars, as opposed to a single range-finding point, the way the Astronomicon did. It was more like a lantern than a beacon. The Pharos could be tuned and pointed, illuminating a site or location for a benefit of range-finding. Though Rabute Gilman was loath to use Xenos technology, Ultramar had to be held together. And to rebuild the 500 worlds, they had to restore communication and travel links by piercing and banishing the current age of darkness. Utilizing the Pharos' strange abilities, Dantioch was able to illuminate Macragge, lighting it up as a bright spot that was visible throughout real space in the warp, despite the effects of the rune storm, providing directional beacon for navigation in the absence of the Astronomicon. From the heart of the rune storm they came, over hours, then days, then weeks. Lone void ships, wounded vessels, broken flotillas, and piecemeal fleets. Some of these ships brought much-needed imports and materials from the other 500 worlds. All brought news or pieces of news of Horus's rebellion. Many were warships of Gilliman's own legion, storm-lost on their way back from the underworld war raging on Kalth, or the bitter campaign against the traitor's sons that snarled across Ultramar as a whole. Some carried more of the shattered legions, like the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and a handful of salamanders, survivors of the treachery of the Dropsite massacre on Esvon 5. It was later discovered that the Pharos possibly possessed some sort of sentience. Dantioch first discovered this byproduct of its process when he was conducting his daily communique with his good friend, the Imperial Fist Captain Alexis Pollux, a survivor of the Battle of Fall, who had been drawn to Ultramar by the strange navigational light of the Pharos. When the Dark Angel's entire expeditionary fleet arrived on Macrogge, drawn by the light of the Pharos, they carried with them a most dangerous prisoner, the murderous Conrad Kurz, Primarch of the Night Lord's Legion. The Night Lord's Primarch and some of his Astartes had been captured months earlier aboard the Dark Angel's flagship, Invincible Reason, but somehow the Night Haunter had escaped. Over the next 4 solar months, he managed to stay one step ahead of his pursuers within the bowels of the mighty warship. Once the Dark Angels had arrived in Ultramarian space, Kurz managed to make his way down to the surface of Macrogge in order to spread as much murder and mayhem amongst the populace as possible. The majority of the Night Haunter's murderous spree occurred behind the supposedly impenetrable walls of the Lord Macrogge's mighty citadel, the Magna Macrogge Civitas. During his daily communication briefing with Captain Pollux, Dantioch had empathically detected the presence of the Night Haunter and quickly warned the Imperial Fist of his impending attack. Utilizing the communication field of the Pharos, the empathic resonance enabled Dantioch to detect Conrad Kurz in the darkness and forewarn Pollux before each of the Renegade Primarch's impending strikes. Then, when his life was in true jeopardy, Dantioch wanted to save him, and so he reached out and took the hand of the fallen Imperial Fist and pulled him through into a massive chamber of the primary location Alpha on Sotha. When both Primarchs Gilliman and Lionel Johnson confronted the Night Haunter a short while later, and their lives too were imperiled, both Pollux and Dantioch were able to pull the Primarchs through the Pharos, saving them from certain death. Now, following their defeat at the hands of the Dark Angels at Sigulsa.
Pardon?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention how the Lion had captured the Night Haunter. Well, if you want to know the whole story, check out my short box, The Thramis Crusade. But to get the gist of it, he was captured on Sigulsa after the battle with the Dark Angels. But the Night Lords were not completely wiped out, and the remnants of the Cursed Legion followed the strange beacon they detected in the warp, which guided them safely to the world of Sotha. Over many solar months, the Night Lords secretly gathered intelligence on the suspicious activities of the Ultramarines, and soon discovered the nature of the arcane device, named the Pharos, upon the restricted planet. And so the Night Lords launched a surprise assault upon the lightly garrisoned world, intent on seizing the Pharos in order to use it to determine a location of their flagship, the Nightfall, as well as the whereabouts of their missing Primarch Conrad Kurz. In the ensuing battle, Warsmith Dantioch sacrificed himself by overloading the Pharos, so the Night Lords would be unable to utilize the device's powerful empathic abilities. Now, unfortunately, unknown to all involved, the sudden burst of psychic power from the device during its overload at the Battle of Sotha reverberated across time and space into the vast intergalactic wilderness, where it was detected by the advanced scouts of the Tyrian Hive fleets. Made aware of the existence of sentient life in the nearby Milky Way galaxy, the Tyranid hive mind set the Great Devourer's course towards this vast new source of biomatter. It would take nearly 10,000 standard years for the hive fleet to arrive in the late 41st millennium. But these events of the Horus heresy had unwittingly set in motion the greatest alien threat mankind would ever know. Now, before I ask you about this great man's life, I have to read his final moments in the arms of his good friend Alexis Pollux. The account was written by scribe Guy Haley, and it reads,
Brother Dantioch! Barabas!
He cradled the warsmith in his arms, and hope bloomed in him. Dantioch lived for the moment. The Iron Warrior's mask lay on the floor, and so Pollux looked upon a face he had never seen. Dantioch was older than he expected. Lines of pain were etched into his scarred face that nothing could erase. His eyes opened. They moved sightlessly, blinded by the intense flare of the Pharos. Alexis!
I'm here, Barabas.
The Warsmith clutched at the arms encircling him.
I never thought to call one such as you as my friend.
He smiled.
You are my friend, Barabas, and my teacher.
I am dying.
You will live!
Dantioch shook his head. Pollux wished he had water to give him. Anything. His croaking voice became insistent. Listen to me. I saw such things in the light. This war is only the beginning. The beginning of the end. Dantioch gasped and settled back, his strength finally leaving him. I'm glad, Alexis. I'm glad to have been. I'm glad to have known you. It is something that friendship can exist at all in this universe of terror and betrayal.
Quiet now. You must save your strength.
Dantioch's scarred mouth cracked into a smile. I have no strength left. I have done my duty, and I am no longer ashamed. His back arched in pain. He gasped. All hail the Emperor of Mankind, still beloved by all. May his dreams be saved, even if we cannot. A long, rattling breath escaped him, and his face stilled. Dantioch's body went limp in Pollux's arms.
Barabas! Barabas! Brother!
He bent his head and wept for his enemy, his friend. Tenderly, he crossed Dantioch's arms upon his chest, as befit a champion of legions who had fallen in service to the Imperium. The warriors of Ultramar would find Pollux there, hours later, his head still bowed in mourning. They looked over the Imperial fist sitting immobile by his friend in the center of the chamber. Someone had draped a blanket around his shoulders, but otherwise he remained as he had been found, motionless with grief.
Refusing food, water, or help, he has not moved since we came here, but sits in vigil.
Well, that will not do. Pollux! Gilman called, raising his voice. Pollux looked up. I command you to rise, Captain Alexis Pollux of the Imperial Fists. He stood, the blanket slipping from his shoulders.
My lord Gilliman.
It is time you let us take care of the Warsmith. We shall commemorate his deeds this evening, as night falls, in a manner befitting a true hero of the Imperium. The Imperial Fist nodded dumbly. Suzerain guards came to him carrying a bier. They made to raise Dantioch up, but Pollux stopped them.
No,
said Pollux softly, but dangerously.
None shall touch him. I will carry him, for he was my brother.
Brothers to the end. Eh, Yuksen?
Yeah. I noticed that you forgot to tell them how they actually met.
I actually didn't find that. I'm assuming you did, though, anyways, when you were talking about Alexis Pollux?
Yeah. If, to the best of my recollection, because it's been a while, he came across Dantioch while Dantioch was working on helping fortify the defenses of Ultramar, and he was there to look over all the stuff that was being done and give his 2 cents in. So that's how they end up coming across each other.
Okay,
so they sort of this image of him going, let me see what you have here. Being a Imperial Fist and you being a Iron Warrior and all.
But so what you're saying though is that they didn't meet until they both ended up in Ultramar, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was when they first actually met.
Well, okay. They might. You don't think that they might have known each other beforehand? They probably didn't become. I agree with you. I don't think they became friends until they reached Ultramar. But do you think that they actually knew of each other before then?
Knew of each other? Maybe. Knew each other? Probably not.
Why?
Because the Imperial Fist and Iron Warriors have almost always had animosity to each other.
Yeah, but still during the Great Crusade, they still had to work with each other. I'm just thinking because on the concept anyways that, I mean, because Rogel Dorn and Perturabo did talk to each other during the Great Crusade. And both of these guys anyways, both of these warriors were part of their inner circle, right? Because Dantioch was favored by Perturabo, and then Alexis Pollux was one of Rogel Dorn's stonemen, right? Or
yes,
that's what they called him, right?
But Dantioch wasn't one of the Trident.
No, he wasn't, but he was still favored and an advisor of Perturabo. So, okay, what I'm saying is that they
favored.
What's that?
As a favored advisor, yes, I want to show him to somebody that I hate.
Well, I'm just saying, anyways, it could very well be a possibility that they kind of, had seen each other before. They're both sitting on the same ship. They're both sitting there as an honor guard for their personal Primarchs, anyways. They're just standing there, anyways, patiently waiting as they bicker back and forth. Look across the way. You see, anyways, the guys on the other side, maybe just a casual nod or just the shake of the head like we're doing this again,
So it popped to my head is giving the other person the finger,
Yeah. I actually just saw a video, and I think it was the Russian president on Terran 42, Putin, and he was meeting the leader of China. I can't remember his name. Ming?
I don't know.
Regardless, anyways, he gets off the plane, and they go to shake hands, and right behind Putin comes his security detail, his guard. And I just kind of imagine the look, anyways, from these two guys, because right next to the Chinese leader, anyways, is his bodyguard. And they both, anyways, they get off the plane, and they both kind of look at each other, and they both give each other kind of this look that's just like perfect. It's like, we know each other. It's just like, I could kill you. You could kill me. Fair enough. How's it going? It's just a slight nod and just a kind of a tight smile. I could see that happening anyways with these Imperial Fists and these Iron Warriors when Rogel Dorn went to talk with Perturabo or vice versa. It's just kind of like, here we are again, you're here too. How's the weather? Just the basic of small talk. But I just find that they're okay. Getting back to off this rabbit trail, I just so enjoy, anyways, though, the relationship of these two. Just the concept that there could be this friendship, anyways, between, of all people, an Iron Warrior and an Imperial Fist. I saw a comment once, anyways, that I wholeheartedly agree with. It is like, this is what Perturabo and Rogel Dorn should have been.
Yeah. Wow.
If neither one of them was as egotistical as they were, this is what could have been. And quite frankly, a lot of that, I think, actually has to do with the simple fact that Alexis Pollux just didn't. He actually had a little bit of humility when he first met up with Barabas.
Oh, a little bit of humility.
Yeah. I mean, that whole concept of surveying his stuff and actually going, what? That's not half bad. Even just saying that, kind of thing. It's just, that kind of breaks the tension. Anyways, that if that had been Rogel Dorn and Perturabo was building this fortress, he would have been like,
I can do it better.
or you missed a spot. Yeah. So just the concept, anyways, that they just with a little bit more humility and a little less ego, you could have had probably one of the greatest bonds, anyways, Warhammer 40K amongst the
Pollux is probably one of the most humble of any of the, especially of the Imperial Fist leaders.
Right. Well, that also was wasn't it because his brother ended up dying? Yet another person that died in his arms. And he, quite frankly, always thought that his brother was better than he was.
Yeah.
And bigger than he was. That was the other thing, too. He was bigger, which is saying something, because Alexis Pollux was quite large.
Yes. Father Pollux, yes.
Yes. But just because he has that ability, and not only that, but also you look at the other side, anyways. Barabas, who who has been weighed down by this guilt, anyways, of losing the 51st Expeditionary Fleet, or most of it, anyways, and then being rebuked by his Primarch. And just, anyways, sitting there, and both of them, I think, anyways, felt a lot of guilt from some of the stuff that had taken place in their lives. And I think they actually kind of melded on that. And that's what really actually constructed a lot of their friendship. I don't know. What do you think of their friendship?
I'm not sure. I think it's more of like at the end of the day, they found more things common than dissimilar that they're able to agree to.
Right. Well, no, I'm just saying, yeah, well, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I mean, you like building fortresses and blowing stuff up too? We should hang out, you know? I can see that being said, you know? But I mean, I'm just talking about anyways, you know, at the end of the day, getting together at a bar, you know, drinking some Fenrisian beer or whatever the Ultramar fancy boys drink, probably wine.
Insulting the boss as the Ultramar guard, not Gilliman, the guy who was in charge of the defenses.
Yeah.
Taking all the credit anyways. Going,
Yeah, you know, I think anyways that you know, all these different things anyways, and they were as close as brothers by the time Dantioch died.
Yeah.
So ironically anyways, Alexis Pollux loses yet another brother. But I mean, let's kind of move away from the sadness of the end of this. I will say though that Barabas is probably my favorite Iron Warrior, just simply because he is, by definition, the grumpy old man that has built up a fortress around his lawn to say, "Get off my lawn," to all the kids in the neighborhood.
So
why I like him. But
we're gonna switch to probably the darkest Iron Warrior.
Oh, really? I didn't think Honsou was actually that bad. But I mean, I know he's a villain. But you mind talking a little bit about Warsmith Honsou?
Yeah, I love the name, but
Honsou, yes.
Honsou.
The way he got his name, if I recall right, anyways, is kind of sad. But
well, to be fair, the fact that he's a byproduct of Fabius Bile, he is going to have to be a somewhat twisted character, isn't he?
Right. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But anyways, Honsou's gene seed originated from Honorable Solaka, an Iron Warrior's apothecary who was murdered during the Horse Heresy by Fabius Bile, who was then responsible for melding his gene seed with that of Imperial Fist, likely Captain Felix Cassander.
What? Hang on, have a second. You mean the captain from the first siege of Hydra Cordalis?
One and the same.
Oh, well.
After
hang on, have a second. If you want to know what he did before he died, I actually did a short box on the first siege of Hydra Cordalis, and he's actually fairly important. But yes, as you just described, he did lose. But sorry, carry on.
After an accident in Bile's laboratory, the container holding Solaka's gene seed was partially defaced, leaving only the words Han and Sao. Hence, you know, the name Honsou.
It's a terrible way to get a name, but
or Honsou or Honsou, however you want to pronounce it. Honsou sounds better than Honsou.
Yes.
So we go with Honsou.
Yes. Go ahead.
He joined the ranks of the Iron Warriors sometime in M41, yet was always looked down upon by the other Iron Warriors due to the taint of his gene seed with that of the hated Imperial Fists. He was often referred to as half-breed. Unlike many of his fellow Chaos Marines, who were veterans of the Long War, Honsou was a youngster. But despite his youth and his tainted heritage, he rose through the ranks of his grand company through bravery, tactical skill, and sheer audacity. He took part in the besieging of the Adeptus Mechanicus fortress of Hydra Cordalis, which we discussed 2 weeks ago as one of the 3 champions of Barban Folk. Although Honsou held a roughly equal place in the Warsmith's retinue, he was denied the formal rank of captain and sought to win the rank at the end of the siege. In the aftermath, like I said before, the Warsmith berated Forex for failing to breach the fortress wall with the mine, and Kroger for failing to protect the Iron Warriors' heavy siege guns during the counterattack, but praised Honsou for his success. With the siege being successful, the Warsmith was elevated to demonhood, and before he disappeared into the warp, he named Honsou his successor. Forex and Kroger had both been killed, and the Warsmith had already judged them unfit to succeed him anyways. Honsou, despite his half-breed heritage, had the ambition and the ruthlessness to then lead the Grand Company. Honsou returned to Medrengard with the gene seed captured from Hydra Cordatus and installed himself as the Lord of the Warsmith's fortress of Kalangol. Though he claimed that the gene seed was sent to Abaddon the Spoiler, Honsou kept some for himself. Using the captured gene seed, he constructed an unusual manufacturing system, the Demon Kalaba, which allowed him to create new Iron Warrior Chaos Space Marines. However, it was far from perfect, and many of the candidates were fleshed out. Many did not survive, and those that did were horribly mutated beasts called the Unfleshed and were cast out from Honsou's fortress.
Brother,
Yes?
I hate to say this because I know what it is, but for those who don't, could you please explain what the Demon Kulaba is?
I suppose, but I do it with a heavy heart, for it contains dark and evil sorcery.
True.
In fact, I'm going to try to be as brief as possible.
Yeah.
Basically, what they do is they fatten up female slaves to an unimaginable size, then turn them into birthing wombs and shove adolescent kids into them. And either they end up becoming Iron Warriors or they end up becoming these mutated things when they get pulled out. And the reason why the defects are called unfleshed is because when they or Iron Warriors in general are pulled out of these birthing wombs, they do not have any flesh. If they are successful in being an Iron Warrior, flesh is taken from male slaves and then stretched and put onto the Iron Warriors.
Okay. But moving on, right?
Yes. I'm
Thank
not
you for
going
that.
deeper into the subject. If you want to go ahead, but I don't suggest it because it's just,
It gets worse.
yes, it's much,
Yeah.
much worse.
A lot worse. But thank you for at least letting people know what it is and how terrible it is. But sorry, carry on, Seth.
Honsou then led his warriors into civil war with two rival warsmiths, Lord Terramino and Lord Barabas, as he refused to uphold his predecessor's promise to share the stolen gene seed amongst the Iron Warriors' commanders. During this war, the exiled Ultramarines captain Uriel Ventress led a group of renegade space marines to infiltrate Honsou's fortress in a mission to destroy the Demon Kulaba.
Which we discussed in our Vox about famous characters of the Ultramarines titled Ultramar's Mightiest Heroes.
Righto, brother. Anywho, in the aftermath, Honsou triumphed over both warsmiths Barossa and Toromino, even though he suffered defeat at the hands of Uriel Ventress. Soon thereafter, he departed Medrengard on a mission of vengeance. Honsou and his retinue arrived at a space station orbiting Tarsus Ultra. They quickly slaughtered the space station's crew and then commandeered multiple orbital torpedoes. Honsou infused an experimental genetic growth strain known as the Heraclitus strain into the warheads of the torpedoes and launched them against Tarsus Ultra. The torpedoes detonated in the planet's atmosphere, spreading the Heraclitus strain across the planet's surface. Tarsus Ultra had recently repelled an invasion by Tyranids thanks to Uriel Ventress and the Ultramarines. However, the Tyranids left some plant spores behind. As intended, the Heraclitus strain interacted with the Tyranid spores, causing the plant life to rapidly grow and spread at a rate of several square kilometers per minute. This caused a chain reaction which ultimately caused billions of citizens of Tarsus Ultra to perish and rendered the planet itself a cold, lifeless rock. All this was done despite Ventress and issue the galaxy a warning. Nobody trifles with Honsou without paying an extremely high price. Honsou traveled to the Maelstrom in search of new recruits as he planned to lead a mighty army to Ultramar, raising it to the ground. What?
I got a kind of a question here. I'm a little confused. Why did the planet end up being a cold, lifeless rock? It seemed like this Heraclitus strain, anyways, caused plant life to rapidly grow. So, I mean, wouldn't it just wouldn't it be like a densely forested planet?
Well, except for they are Tyranid spores.
Okay.
And Tyranids do kind of consume life.
I still don't get it, though, I guess. I understand that they're Tyranid spores, but it causing the plant life to rapidly grow and spread at a rate of several kilometers per minute. I mean, that means anyways that it's like, does that mean anyways that they die off quickly too?
Well, there's either two ways you can look at it. Either they died off very quickly, or the meaning of lifeless rock is nobody was left.
Oh, so it's really just now anyways, it's really more of like a fern-infested planet, but nothing lives there because the plants ate everything.
Yes.
Ah, okay. That makes more sense. Okay, sorry. No, I was just thinking anyways, it went from like this, flora and fauna just like spreading all over the place, and then all of a sudden it went from that to
yeah, the Tyranids all of a sudden became plants that consumed everything, basically. That's the easiest way to put it.
Sorry for interrupting. Carry on, sir.
Where was I? Honsou traveled the Maelstrom in search of new recruits as he planned to lead a mighty army to Ultramar, raising it to the ground, and the annual skull harvest hosted by Huron Blackheart, which entails mighty warlords bring their war bands to the planet of New Badab, seemed to be an ideal way to raise an army. Honsou arrived just prior to the start of one, setting up a camp with his fellow Iron Warriors and participated in the event, with underlying rule being that whoever slays the leader of a warband may claim the warband for their own. Honsou sent the newborn, Uriel Ventress's clone, and Arderic Vanes, an ex-member of the Raven Guard, to fight the other warlords' champions. They fought well, swelling Honsou's army to the size of 5,000. Eventually, Honsou, a Khornate champion named Pashtok, and a Slaneshi champion named Notha Atese were the only participants left. Pashtok upheld a deep dislike for Honsou, mainly because Honsou killed one of his mighty champions with the help of his bionic arm, and the fact that Honsou was a half-breed. Notha Atese was swiftly defeated, and Honsou was left fighting Pashtok. He managed to destroy Pashtok's demon weapon with his own, but Pashtok called for one of his champions to bring him a new one. In response, the champion, Kaderis Grendel, who had sworn allegiance to Honsou, plunged the new weapon into Pashtok's chest. Honsou then beheaded Pashtok, thus winning the Skull Harvest. Notha Atese, who had only been wounded, swore his allegiance, and Honsou left New Badab with a force of almost 17,000 warriors. But before he left, Huron Blackheart warned him, telling him to kill his champions as soon as they were no longer useful, to prevent a possible mutiny. Huron's final words to Honsou before he left New Badab were, "Always remember, the strongest are strongest alone." Using Moriana, the damned seer of Abaddon, the Despoiler, Honsou was able to free the demon prince Makar, an ancient enemy of the Ultramarines, who had been imprisoned on the indomitable space fort by Chapter Master Marnius Calgar. With his army ready, Honsou then unleashed his plan for revenge against Uriel Ventress, the complete destruction of Ultramar. Striking first at Torrentis, Honsou had Makar unleash his demon army on the planet's domed city, destroying all its inhabitants. It was only after this that Honsou realized that Makar had forced himself into a position of sharing command of the army, which the demon had dubbed the Blood Bowl, with Honsou, a situation neither could tolerate for long. Honsou later took Cataris, Grendel, Arderic Vanes, and the newborn to Kalth, Ventress's homeworld, with instructions from Makar to destroy the tomb of Ventennis, a famed Ultramarines captain who had defended the planet from the Word-Bearers during the Horus Heresy, as Makar himself was unable to go near Kalth. Before being accepted into the Ultramarines, Uriel Ventress had discovered the tomb in his youth, so its location was something the newborn knew. Vanes was captured in the initial battle for Gilliman's Gate, but Honsou, Grendel, and the newborn were able to find the tomb. As they prepared to destroy it, Honsou investigated Ventennis' sarcophagus, finding the shard of Erebus, a combat knife buried with the captain. Of course, Erebus. He comes back to him.
I have to say, not again. No. Even when he's not there, he's always part of the story. God, I hate that guy.
Honsou surmised that due to Makar's fear of Kalth and Venetta's war gear, the knife was capable of harming the demon prince. When Ventress arrived with his squads and a group of Raven Guard, Grendel and the Blade Dancers were killed. Honsou then charged the newborn with killing Ventress, but Ventress was able to defeat his clone. A battle erupted during which Honsou mortally wounded Vanes, but the Iron Warriors were in turn defeated by what appeared to be the ghost of Remus Ventennis and the Legion of the Damned. With his Iron Warriors dead, Honsou activated the trigger for the bomb intended to destroy the tomb, burying Ventress and his allies. Although Ventress, Pausanias, and most of the Astartes present survived the explosion, Honsou's own body was never found. The drill machine that had carried the Iron Warriors to the tomb had also disappeared. As it turned out, Honsou had indeed escaped the cavern and hid in the warrens of Kalth's surface cities until he could steal an orbit-capable shuttle. Despite a dogged pursuit by Inquisitor Namira Suzaku, Honsou eluded her and her retinue and escaped the planet. He is currently at large. How about we move from extremely dark character to someone who is infamous?
Sure. But before we do, I actually have a question, and then I had my 2 cents anyways about Honsou. My first question. Of all the things that I've seen of Honsou, he's got a necrodermic arm. How did he get that?
So, during his fights on Cordatus, he ended up losing his arm. And then when Ventress attacked Medringard, when he was captured, his best friend had this necrodermis arm, and he was also captured. And so basically it went, I am interested in that arm. I think I will take it for myself. Sort of situation.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Quite frankly, anyways, I mean, we've actually kind of skirted around talking about Honsou for quite a while now, Yuksen. I mean, we first kind of found out about Honsou probably when we started talking about the Ultramarines, right?
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense because of Ventress and because he's, one of the more notable heroes of the Ultramarines. So, and not only that, but Honsou is also tied not only with Ventress, but also with Marnie Cal. Yeah. And but when we talked about them anyways, he actually was we kind of put him on the back burner because we were talking about this other demon, the Thriceborn. What's his name?
Yeah.
Makar? Yeah. Who, if I recall right anyways, does end up getting captured again, right? And then stuffed back into that cage.
I don't remember. Probably.
Okay. I'm pretty sure Marnius Calgar got him again. But Honsou is still at large. I got one other question for you real quick before we move on. Yeah.
Everything outside of when he went to Medringard everything on either side of that section, he doesn't seem like that bad of a guy. It's once you get to him returning to Medrengard and doing all of that twisted, sadistic, dark, evil crap.
Kind of puts him up there with Fabius Bile, actually. But, well, I don't know about that. I mean, this whole thing, anyways, with the skull harvest, you seem pretty, not very honorable, to say the least. I've lost my weapon. Hand me another one, sir. For Honsou! I've been stabbed through the chest. Oh, well, good. Now I can behead you. Yeah, that's a little, shady, wouldn't you think?
Yes, but not twisted.
Not as twisted. I'll give you that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I just, when we started looking more into him anyways, I just, because like you said, anyways, all the stuff that we talked about him before anyways, he seemed like he was just, another commander of the Iron Warriors. But the more we kind of dug into him, the more he's, pardon my French, but kind of a bastard. It's probably the best way to describe him.
He is technically from two different.
Technically, he is a bastard. But no, I mean, like, by in the full sense of the word.
And for that matter, he is creating them as well.
Yes.
Since, all of those gene seeds being used are Imperial Fist.
I love it when we actually get to use a swear word because we're actually using it the proper way. And what its actual definition is. But yeah, I just never knew that he was really that dark of a character. I mean, even Abaddon anyways, if you really want to look into Abaddon, yeah, there's some darkness in there too. But I mean, normally anyways, when you think of Abaddon, he's, the leader of the Black Legion. He doesn't, and he does stuff anyways that, I mean, like when he killed Sigismund, I mean, he could have, ripped out his gene seeds and then done horrible things to his body, and he didn't. He just, he very honorably anyways placed him back in the ship and then sent it back to Terra. Now, mind you, he did carve on his armor anyways. I'm coming for you pretty much. But I mean, that's, that's small potatoes kind of thing. I don't know. I was kind of shocked.
I think he would seem less evil if they had another character that created this machine for him.
Right.
And basically said, here's this machine that we have.
Like,
there's pretty much no other way for you to make Iron Warriors, but I did make this very twisted machine. In that case, you would be more in the prospect of, it's because he has to use it. He doesn't have any other option.
Or he's using it to his advantage. He's like, well, it's already here. We might as well use it. Yeah, I got you.
Not he
built it.
Asked for it to be created.
Yeah. Well, anyways. So, real quick, anyways. I know you think, anyways, probably a lot less of Honsou now that we've looked more into him. But what do you think of the man?
Well, I find it funny how at the end of his story, somebody with a Term 42 Japanese sounding name is being chased after by somebody with a Japanese sounding name.
I'm just waiting for him to. He's he's going to do something with that blade of Erebus, and it's not going to be fun because it has to do with Erebus.
He's going to summon Erebus. What? No, that would be worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's his blade. What does it do? It summons Erebus. Oh, burn it. Burn it. I don't care how you do it. Just get rid of it. I also need to mention here anyways, yet again, the Legion of the Damned randomly pops up.
Yes.
Is their forte. We will have to do a Vox anyways on the Legion of the Damned, but it will be weird because this is literally, they're almost like a MacGuffin.
It's their shtick.
Yes, it is their shtick. All seems lost. We're all gonna die. Poof, and these guys show up. But, anyways,
there's a Grey Knight that whenever we're doing the Grey Knights, we need to find out when we're doing the Grey Knights.
Well, that will be up to our listeners.
You need to let us know when we're doing the Grey Knights.
Well, I'm assuming, anyways, next month, anyways, they're probably going to be wanting us to do the Imperial Fist. I mean, that would make sense, right? We just did the Iron Warriors. We might as well do the Imperial Fist next. But
we'll leave it up to them.
Yes. So don't be surprised, anyways, in the new posts that are coming up, anyways, on what we're going to be doing next. Go ahead and There'll definitely be the Grey Knights in there and the Imperial Fists. But there'll be a couple other factions too. So just make sure that you do that. But
Like the Death Watch.
Yep. Yeah, they'll be there too. But moving on. I wanted to talk about Warsmith Shon'tu. Now, Shon'tu was an infamous warsmith.
Another Oriental-like name. Shon'tu.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, now Shon'tu was an infamous warsmith of the Iron Warriors Trading Legion, and later Chaos Lord of the Iron Warriors warband called the Sons of the Forge. He continually plagued the veteran First Captain Darneth Lysander of the Imperial Fist chapter over many centuries.
Wait a minute. The Darneth Lysander?
Yeah. One and the same.
Lysander the Terran? Lysander the mighty first captain of the Imperial Fist? Lysander?
Yes, it's the same guy.
Well, he must have made short work of Shon'tu.
Actually, no. But we are getting a little ahead of ourselves. Now, Shon'tu was present during the Siege of Terra, and like most within the Iron Warriors, swore an eternal hatred for their bitter rivals, the Imperial Fist. It was in 585.M40 that the Imperial Fist's Second Company, under the command of the newly promoted Captain Lysander, deployed to break the siege of Hadrak Tor, a planet in the merciless grasp of Warsmith Shon'tu. Having secured the high ground, there's no way you can beat me, Anakin. I have the high ground. Sorry. Having secured the high ground.
Lysander has a thunder hammer. Sorry. He has Dorn's fist.
Not at this point,
Right?
actually. Not at this point. But we were getting there. But anyways, having secured the high ground, Lysander's strike force set up teleport homers to summon the Terminators of the First Company into the thick of the fighting. However, things went awry, and many of the Terminators materialized over deep chasms, or else in solid rock, including Cletus, captain of the First Company. Before dying of his grievous wounds, he thrust his thunderhammer, the Fist of Dawn, into Lysander's hands, and bade him seek vengeance through victory. This Lysander did, leading the survivors of the First Company alongside his own to shatter the Iron Warrior's stronghold. Yet the War Master escaped Lysander's wrath, and Shon'tu fled from the planet in defeat. But he had left a mystery in his wake. Survivors spoke of how the Warsmith had concerned himself little with the desolation of the world, and had instead buried himself in a search through its millennia-old archives. Unfortunately, there had been no way to know what Shon'tu had been searching for, as he had destroyed the archives before making his escape. As the 40th millennium drew to a close, the strike cruiser Shield of Valor was lost to the warp. All hands, Lysander amongst them, were lost alongside, with slender hope for their return. Cast far off course by the whimsies of the warp, they were flung forward through the centuries and far across the galaxy. When the Shield of Valor finally emerged into real space, it did so in the fading years of the 41st millennium, in an orbit of Maladrax, an Iron Warrior's fortress in the eye of Terra's fringe. Swiftly disabled by the world's formidable defenses, the strike cruiser was boarded, and a handful of survivors, Lysander amongst them, taken as prisoners. Lysander's captor was none other than Warsmith Shon'tu, who brutally tortured the stalwart Imperial Fist over many solar weeks. Warsmith Shon'tu, believing himself a reincarnation of the legendary Dark Age warlord, who had borne the same name. He had christened Maladrax after his predecessor's mythical fortress, and, as he went about his bloody tortures, Shon'tu recounted his glorious past deeds, ever boasting of the horrific legends he would reforge. He spoke endlessly of the Spear of Hydros, bringer of the swarm, and his search to reclaim the Leviathan war Barku, Tamunash, whose weapons had laid waste to 1,000 worlds, and Shon'tu boasted would do so again. In the hands of their most hated foe, the Imperial Fists were shown no mercy or pity. The Iron Warriors tortured them for weeks, and only the astonishing tenacity of the Sons of Dorn allowed them to survive a full month of incarceration at the tender mercies of the Iron Warriors. Although Lysander's body was bloody and broken, his will remained intact. Throwing off his shackles, he and a handful of the Imperial Fist survivors fought their way unarmored and initially with no weapons save for their fury and their fists through the planetary capital, managing to reach a shuttle and escape into the void. Lysander swore eternal vengeance upon the hated Warsmith. Reinstated as captain of the First Company, Lysander's first act of command was to lead the Imperial Fist to Maldarax in 966.M41 to scour the Iron Warriors from the planet. But, yet again, Shon'tu eluded Lysander's grasp and made good his escape. Next, in 969.M41, Lysander led 3 companies to liberate the planet of Teledorn from the Sons of the Forge and his old nemesis, Warsmith Shon'tu. The captain proved too proud to accept aid from the Ultramarines and Blood Angels, and his actions led to unnecessary casualties to the Imperial Fists. Captain Vogan was killed, and his 3rd company badly ravaged before Captain Cato Sicarius's Ultramarines overrode Lysander's objections and intervened. Teledorn was freed, but Warsmith Shon'tu escaped again in 971.M41. Learning that Shon'tu had been responsible for an earlier Tyrian incursion and orc predations on the Migor Rift, Captain Master Hagen of the Imperial Fist ordered the phalanx to Maladrax to end the Warsmith's threat once and for all. While most of the chapter assailed Shon'tu's planetized strongholds, Captain Tor Garadon of the Imperial Fist's 3rd Company, alongside Cato Sicarius's Ultramarines and Erasmus Tycho's Blood Angels, conducted a boarding action of the recent reclaimed Leviathan war Barku, Tamunash. Together, the boarding parties managed to destroy enough critical systems for the phalanx to gain the upper hand. As the Tamunash began to break apart, Garadon was defeated by Shon'tu, but Lysander teleported aboard Tamunash's command deck and gravely wounded the Warsmith. The Space Marines escaped by Thunderhawk gunship, and the dying Tamunash vanished into the warp, taking Shon'tu with it, never to be seen again. Or one would think. Yet, in 975.M41, Imperial Fist veteran Sergeant Tynon was discovered dead on the world of Endrion while training Cadians. The words, "Shon'tu lives," were carved into his chest. Later, Lysander tracked remnants of the Sons of the Forge to the Tarokka system. However, they found only one dead Chaos Marine there, an Iron Warrior who the Imperium thought had taken command of the warband following Shon'tu's death. He was found disemboweled and chained, with the words, "Shon'tu lives," smeared in blood next to his corpse. Shon'tu eventually returned to exact vengeance on the Imperial Fist in 999.M41. Allying with the demon Be'lakor, Shon'tu planned to hijack the phalanx and use it to bombard Terra's Imperial Palace. Taking the Imperial Fist by surprise, he found only the battered 3rd Company, who, ironically, was later joined by the Legion of the Damned, defending the vessel. Ultimately, the duo's plot was foiled thanks to the intervention of the Legion of the Damned, and the Warsmith was killed by the 1st Company Squadron Terminator, Sergeant Fura. So, after all this, Lysander didn't get his vengeance. But what do you think of this Warsmith, brother?
First off, I wonder if the Iron Warriors have some sort of beacon on them that says Legion of the Damned attack us.
You know, I was thinking the same thing.
Because I think they're the only ones I can think of where they've been stopped twice.
Or shown up twice. I'm sure, anyways, the other legions have seen, or the other original foundings have seen the Legion of the Damned. It's just, yeah, I agree with you. It seems like, well, I think it's more, anyways, it's the Iron Warriors. Maybe they're hunting Iron Warriors. Maybe that's what it is. Instead of the
That's
Imperial.
what I said.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about the Imperial.
Because the last time that they showed up, it was the Ultramarines.
Right. So yeah, maybe they just have it out. Maybe they were actually like part of the, because no one really knows what their founding was. Maybe they were actually part of the Iron Warriors and they turned loyal, and then something weird happened in the warp, which would make sense why. Anyways, we're getting far afield. What do you think of Shon'tu though? You think he's really actually dead?
Are you kidding me? They can't kill him off.
He's
Then
like
he
warts.
come
Can't
back
get rid of him.
again.
Well, all right, brother. I believe we have just only one more time for one Iron Warrior. So who's the last guy we're going to talk about?
Last person we're going to talk about is Kalkator. Now, Kalkator is an Iron Warriors warsmith who took part in the Horse Heresy as well as the battle known as the Iron Cage against the Imperial Fists. By 544.M32, Kalkator still continued to plague the Imperium and led a grand company from the world Klostra near the Maelstrom. However, his forces were nearly destroyed in the War of the Beast, when an orc attack moon suddenly appeared in Klostra's orbit. It soon launched a massive orc horde that overwhelmed the Iron Warriors and human colonists who lived on Klostra and worshipped the Warsmith and his grand company. Faced with their destruction, Kalkator and what remained of his grand company were forced to constantly retreat from the orcs until their Vox picked up transmission from their strike cruisers, Palamos and Scythe of Shravane, in Klostra's orbit. The two ships were now all that remained of Kalkator's fleet, and they had only survived due to being stationed at the Grand Company's outpost in the Ostrom system. The Warsmith did not know why they had returned to Klostra, and quite frankly, he didn't really care. With the two cruisers as his salvation, he immediately ordered the strike cruisers' commanders to extract the Grand Company from Klostra before they were destroyed by the orc war. Though they faced heavy fire and the loss of several of their Thunderhawks, the Grand Company was able to be evacuated, only to see the Scythe of Shravane be destroyed by the orcs. The Thunderhawks were then forced to land upon the Palamodes. As it began to retreat from the attack moon, and once he was aboard, Kalkator took command of the strike cruiser from its commander Atanex. He soon ordered the strike cruiser to head to their outpost in the Ostrom system, only to be told by Atanex they had fallen, not to the beast's orcs as he had expected, but to a Black Templar's crusade, which was why the strike cruisers had returned to Klostra.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me get this right. Are you telling me that the Black Templars were still crusading? Oh, the Imperium was almost wiped off the face of the galaxy by orcs?
Yeah. That's what my notes say.
You gotta be kidding me. Well,
Anyways, like I was saying, faced with having suffered significant losses to his grand company and nearly everything they had possessed, Kalkator gave the orders to begin a warp jump. When asked what their destination was, the warsmith did not say and only replied with, "We can't fight them both." It was a bold move, one that seemed to work out to his benefit because instead of just disappearing into the warp, Kalkator and his forces pop up on Zelenik 4 and are trapped by both the orcs and Black Templars under his old enemy Magneric. In the face of mutual annihilation by the Greenskins, Kalkator was able to negotiate a tense truce with the Templars, and the two agreed to temporarily fight side by side. Later on, Kalkator and his forces entered into an allegiance with the 5th Exemplar under First Captain Zerberin, battling together on the Iron Warriors' fortress world of Prax. When Kalkator and his allies learned that the Beast had been defeated, Zerberin led a rendezvous with the Black Templar and attempted to explain that the Iron Warriors be allowed to leave in peace due to their contributions to the war effort. However, the Black Templars, led by High Marshal Bohemond, would have none of it, and many of the 5th Exemplar brethren rebelled as well at the prospect of opposing the Imperium. In a subsequent battle with the Black Templars, Zerberin was faced with killing either Bohemond or Kalkator, and ultimately chose the former. With no other choice left, Zerberin knelt before Kalkator and pledged himself to the Iron Warriors' Grand Company. With Zerberin and those close to him in tow, Kalkator disappeared into the Eye of Terror and has not been heard from since. So, brother, before we leave, what do you think of this guy?
He sounds honestly more like a loyalist than he does a Chaos Space Marine. Well, he does and he doesn't. The concept that he actually fights fairly honorably. I mean, he still opposes the Imperium.
Yeah.
This is probably actually the closest guy that we've talked to, anyways. I understand he is still a Chaos Space Marine, but probably the closest that we've talked to in general, anyways, about like Renegade Marines, which we briefly discussed over the period of our Voxes. But real quick, anyways, you want to explain to the people the difference between what a Renegade Marine is and what a Chaos Space Marine is, Yuksen?
Okay, so technically there are 3 different types of Space Marines defined. First, there's loyalists, like Ultramarines, those who fight for the Imperium.
The Imperium.
And the Imperium's word.
Right.
The glory of the Renegades, who are very over a drastic spectrum. They are ones that are not considered loyalists, but could be either like mercenary groups or originally the first Soul Drinkers chapter was a renegade one. They were loyalists, but were considered traitors, and so basically they were renegades.
Yeah, okay. But even the original founding, anyways, of the Soul Drinkers, that one was goofy. I remember reading into that, and it's like, well, they still are loyal, but the Imperium like doesn't want any part of them at one point, so they labeled them renegade. It was kind of bizarre. Normally, when I think of renegades, I think of like the Black Shields or the group, anyways, that you've been talking about during your thing, anyways, with the Carcadons. What's that group? The Ashen Claws.
Yeah.
Those are the guys I kind of think more, anyways, as renegades.
Yeah.
But and one of the things though that is just so irritating is that the Imperium just always thinks of these guys as like renegades will just eventually turn into Chaos Space Marines. That's always the thought process. Is like, well, because they do not have the Emperor's light, then they will always fall to chaos.
And ironically, in a lot of cases, it's a self-fulfilling truth because the way that they treat them like that, the renegades
have no other home.
Chapters go, fine, let's do that then. But there's no other way out of this. Might as well.
Right. But I do think, anyways, like, for instance, the Ashen Claws and the Black Shields are a good example of ones, anyways, that just simply don't do that. They're like, well, they'll fall to chaos. Well, have they? No. I mean, the Black Shields have been around since the Horus Heresy. The Ashen Claws, okay, the Ashen Claws are a little bit newer, right?
The Ashen Claws are out for themselves.
Right, but no, I mean, they haven't been around as long as the Horus Heresy, right? They're a little newer, but I still think they've been around for a while.
The Ashen Claws were originally part of the Raven Guard.
Oh, well,
they actually technically precede the Horus Heresy.
Oh, so they are that old too. Okay,
because they were originally one of the groups of the Terranborn. Because there's that whole thing that when Corvus Corax took over, he basically started, exiling and shedding off a lot of the Terran people because they're using their old traditions, which were almost slavers.
They were slave drivers. Let's call them what they are.
Which is, something that Corvus Corax was definitely against.
Very much against, yes.
So he basically said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to use you almost like a penal legend first. How he treated him a couple of times. And then he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to send you off into oblivion and I'll call you back.
But
then he goes, but I'm not giving you a number and I'm going to change my number anyways. So.
Right. But kind of get back to the Renegades anyways. They are a group that, quite frankly, anyways, they do not fight they fight for their own cause. That's really what it boils down to. Be it they be mercenaries or whatever. They fight for their own cause. They do not fight for the Imperium. They also do not fight for chaos. So, and like you said,
they may fight for what they think the Imperium should be.
right. I mean, yes, there are niches anyways within Renegades that are very much anyways. A lot of them anyways should be loyalists, but it's either like they have a problem with, like, for instance, the High Lords of Terra and how they deal with things. That's
or the ecclesiarchy.
Or, I mean, there's a lot of things. It's just like, we have problems with your political structure. We will still continue to fight for humanity and the Imperium, but we're not going to take orders from you prissy little pansies that sit there and dictate orders to us Space Marines.
Or we are not going to bow before the ecclesiarchy.
Yeah.
And that's when they go, heresy!
Right.
Brand them!
Well, okay.
For they are traitors.
I will say, anyways, there are some loyalist Space Marines that do walk that fine line, though. Like, for instance, the Space Wolves. That whole the ecclesiarchy thing, anyways. I mean, they have ties that are so far back. They're just like, I mean, what's his face? Bjor. No, that's not. No, that was the first. That was the chapter master. Shoot, the dreadnought. Grandpa. It's Grandpa. The fell-handed. Crap. What was his name? He's known as the fell-handed. Bjorn? Yeah. Bjorn the fell-handed.
Bjorn. Bjorn.
He has been known anyways to say he's like, oh, worshiping the emperor. Isn't that how this whole thing got started? So they've been around long enough anyways that the imperial truth is still actually part of their system. And they've been able to walk that fine line because they're the Space Wolves. But, and I think anyways, to a lesser extent, you've got a lot of actually the first foundings follow that very thin line because they have this tradition anyways that dates back before the ecclesiarchy did.
Another possible would be the Carcradons.
As a renegade, well, they're loyalists.
No, not as renegade, but as being somebody who walks that fine line because they don't allow anybody basically near them. So we don't know.
They may be all for the ecclesiarchy. We just don't know. Probably not, though. From what
they have, like, the reason why I say they probably walk that fine line is because they have things like talismans and
right. I think, anyways, from what you have actually said in your short boxes, it sounds like they do worship the emperor as almost like a god being, but he's not. He's going to lead them back into glory, but he's not like it's like he's sleeping. That's the thought process. But anyways, we're getting very far afield anyways from Iron Warriors and Kalkator. Why I mentioned it though is that some of the stuff that Kalkator doesn't sound very much like a Chaos Space Marine.
Yeah.
It sounds much more like a renegade.
Like he doesn't try to backstab the Black Templars.
Well, we do see anyways
after that shift that very strenuous treaty.
Well, okay. So that anyways, I mean, you do see anyways, you see a lot of chapters of the Chaos Space Marines. They do still retain a lot of their own code of honor.
Right.
Which I would kind of agree with here. But I mean, just even at the very beginning anyways, just what he's been doing. What have you been doing? Well, I live on this one planet and the people here anyways treat us as gods. That doesn't sound very chaosy. I mean, the Chaos Space Marine, anyways.
Going back to Honsou, well, we are throwing them into these, like...
Yeah, exactly. The Demon Kulaba, or however you say it. Yes. It's just very much more of a... it actually reminded me a lot of Fenris and just how the warriors interact anyways with the Space Wolves. They live on this mountaintop and they sometimes choose us to join them. Kind of thing. It sounds a lot like that. So, which, like I said, doesn't sound very Chaos Space Marine. I mean, Chaos Space Marines would have enslaved the place and then just ruled over it with an iron fist. But
Now,
this
mind
seems
you,
like-
we cannot commit to what we're saying because we know when somebody finds out more information about this guy, they'll say, he was horrible.
eh,
He enslaved half the population
it
and
sounds
tortured them for hours upon hours.
yeah. But it sounds like, anyways, that this guy, anyways, he literally just kind of lets them do what they do as long as they leave him alone, and he can kind of dictate what he wants them to do because they worship him. Very
Right.
much like the Space Wolves do on Fenris. So to me, anyways, he strikes me more as a Iron Warrior that turned more renegade than Chaos Space Marine. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that he is still technically a Chaos Space Marine. He's just, it's almost like he's one of those people that's on the outer rim, so to speak.
Okay. What do you mean?
So it's just like, yeah, he pretty much does things the way he wants to. If, for example, Perturabo was to hail him, he'd go like, okay, yeah, I'll head off and fight for you. But
Right.
otherwise, I'll just do my own thing over here.
But that's why
This
he
is
broke.
hippy-dippy.
But that's why he probably broke all the boxes so that they can't get a hold of him. He sounds very much like he wants to do his own thing. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. If Perturabo showed up and was like, "We are now starting a new crusade," he'd be like, "All right, let me get to my ships."
Yeah. Not because he would be scared of him, maybe just because this is my duty.
Loyalty. Yeah. He's the big daddo, you know. Well, on that note, we are out of time for today. I know we went a little bit long, but we were talking about notable characters. Join us next week for our usual Q&A at the end of the month, where we'll have an interesting conversation, probably, with our good friend Sakrona.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this box. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out our shop. We got some cool stuff there, like clothes, pillows, and hats.
And don't forget the rabbits. Also, by the way, we will answer the question next week. Are pandas really bears?
It depends. Panda bears are bears.
No. There's actually something that's very interesting that I'm going to actually bring up about that. So, okay. No. Next week. Next week when we do questions and answers, I will answer that.
By the way,
Yeah, what?
don't forget the rabbits.
I said rabbits. I said rabbits, Yuksen. But for those of you that are listening and you still want to put questions in the comments so that we can answer your questions, feel free to do that. We will be answering them next week. Have a great day. And as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar
And Yuksen.
signing off.